He pulled 8 men out of a burning tank with his bare hands. His skin was blistered. His uniform was scorched. He could barely breathe. All 8 men stood up, dusted themselves off, and walked away without a single word. 3 days later, Patton found out. March 1945. Western Germany. The Rhine crossing. A Sherman tank took a direct hit from German anti-tank fire. Engine compartment on fire. 8 men trapped inside. The hatch jammed. Every soldier in the vicinity knew the math. A burning tank gives you roughly 2 minutes before the ammunition cooks off. When tank rounds detonate from the inside, there is nothing left. Not the tank. Not the crew. Nothing you could put in a box and send home. Standard procedure was clear take cover. Get away from the tank. There was nothing anyone could do. Every soldier nearby was running, except one. A black private from a nearby supply unit. A man who had no orders to be there. No training for this. No reason on earth to run toward that burning metal. Started moving at a sprint directly toward the tank. His sergeant screamed at him to stop. He didn't stop. What happened next, and what happened 3 days later, in a tent at 3rd Army headquarters, is one of the most quietly powerful stories of the entire war. His name was Private James Carter, 22 years old, from Mississippi, 18 months in the Army, assigned to a supply unit. He had never expected to see combat. He reached the tank in seconds. The metal was already too hot to touch with bare skin. Carter pulled off his jacket, wrapped it around his hands, grabbed the jammed hatch and pulled. It didn't move. He could hear them inside, 8 men pounding on the metal from the other side, screaming. Carter planted his boots against the hull of the tank for leverage. Every reflex in his body was telling him to run. The ammunition was already cooking. Small explosions were popping inside the tank like the opening seconds of something catastrophic. He pulled again. Harder. Everything he had. The hatch gave. Thick black smoke poured out in a wave. Carter didn't wait for it to clear. He reached in blind, grabbed the first man he could find, dragged him out, dropped him on the ground, and reached back in. 1. Reached in again. 2. The tank was getting hotter. The small internal explosions were getting louder. The jacket wrapped around his hands was starting to smoke. 3. 4. 5. Every time he pulled someone out, he had to go back in. Every time he went back in, the fire had grown. 6. 7. One more. 8. Carter pulled the last man clear, stumbled back from the tank, dropped to his knees on the ground. His hands were destroyed, the jacket long gone, skin already blistering in real time. His uniform was scorched through in multiple places. He was coughing so hard he could barely breathe, his lungs full of the kind of smoke that kills people in minutes. 30 seconds later, the ammunition detonated. The tank became a fireball. A column of black smoke rose 50 feet in the air. Shrapnel tore through the ground in every direction. If Carter had been 5 seconds slower on that last man, neither of them would have been alive to see it. 8 men sat on the ground around him, coughing, shaking, alive. Carter knelt a few feet away, hands still smoking from the burns, trying to get air into his lungs. And one by one, all 8 men stood up, dusted themselves off, and walked away. Not one of them looked back, not one word, not one glance. Just gone. A lieutenant from Carter's unit had seen the entire thing from 30 yards away. He stood there for a moment, watching the 8 men disappear toward their battalion, watching Carter still on his knees catching his breath, hands already swelling from the burns. The lieutenant was a man who had been in the Army long enough to have seen extraordinary things. But this, the rescue, and what came after, stopped him cold. He walked over to Carter, asked if he needed a medic. Carter said yes. Then the lieutenant went back to his post and wrote a report. Not a routine action report. A full, detailed account of what he had witnessed: the burning tank, the jammed hatch, the 8 extractions, the explosion, and the 8 men who had walked away without a word. He recommended Carter for a medal. The report moved up the chain of command. Division. Corps. Army. It reached Patton's desk. Patton read it once. Then he read it again. He called for his aide, Captain Morris. He didn't ask about the medal. He didn't ask about the paperwork. He asked one specific question. Can you find the 8 men Carter saved? Morris confirmed he could. Arrange a meeting. Carter, the 8 men, my tent, 3 days. Morris asked what the meeting was for. Patton looked at him. Because something happened that needs to be addressed, and a medal alone doesn't address it. 3 days later, everyone was in that tent. Patton arrived first. Carter was brought in next. 22 years old, still in bandages on both hands, second-degree burns that the medics said would take weeks to heal properly. He stood at attention and saluted. Patton returned the salute. Then, he crossed the tent and extended his hand. "Private Carter, I read about what you did. That took extraordinary courage." Carter shook with his bandaged hand. Patton looked at the bandages. "Those from the tank?" "Yes, sir. Second degree. They'll heal. You saved 8 men, Private." "I did what anyone would have done, sir." Patton looked at him for a moment. "No. You did what most men wouldn't. Everyone else was running away. Then the 8 men were brought in. All white. All from the tank battalion, the crew of the Sherman that had burned. They filed into the tent and lined up facing Patton. Some of them recognized Carter standing to the side. None of them acknowledged him. Patton looked at them, one by one. Let the silence build. Private Carter pulled all 8 of you out of a burning tank. Is that correct?" A corporal answered. "Yes, sir. And after he saved your lives, not one of you thanked him. Not one of you acknowledged what he'd done. You simply walked away. No one spoke." A sergeant tried. "Sir, we were in shock. We nearly died." Patton cut him off without raising his voice. "I've nearly died, Sergeant. Several times. I've never been too much in shock to thank the man who saved me." He started walking slowly down the line. "Private Carter's hands are bandaged, because he burned them pulling each of you out of that tank. His uniform was scorched through. He breathed smoke that could have killed him, and he did it 8 times. Once for each of you." He stopped in front of the sergeant. "And you didn't even look at him." The sergeant looked at the ground. "Look at the ground all you want. That won't change what you did." Patton stepped back so he could address all 8 of them at once. "Here is what is going to happen. Private Carter is going to stand right there. Each of you is going to walk up to him, salute him, and thank him for saving your life." One of the men, a private, spoke up. "Sir, he's a private. We don't salute privates." The tent went very quiet. Patton turned to face the man who'd spoken. His voice, if anything, got quieter. "You don't salute rank, son. You salute the man who pulled you out of a burning tank when everyone else was running the other direction. A beat. And if you have a problem with that, you can explain to me why the color of a man's skin matters more than the fact that he saved your life." Nobody spoke. "Corporal, you're first. This is the kind of story that deserves to be seen. Subscribe to WWII Forgotten Frontline and hit the like button. It's how this channel grows and how these stories reach people who are actually looking for them." The corporal walked across the tent, stood in front of Carter, hesitated for exactly 1 second, then raised his hand in a salute. Carter returned it. "Thank you," the corporal said quietly, "for saving my life." Carter nodded. One by one, all 7 remaining men did the same. Some moved immediately. Some hesitated. One looked like every step across that tent cost him something. But all 8 saluted Private James Carter and said the words out loud. When the last man finished, Patton pinned the soldier's medal on Carter's uniform himself. Then he turned back to the 8. "You will all be transferred to different units, effective immediately." A crew member protested. "Sir, we've been together for a year. You were a crew until you failed to recognize that the man who saved your lives deserved more than your silence." He let that land. "In your new units, you may learn something this unit apparently didn't teach you. That a man's character is determined by what he does when it matters, not by who his parents were or what he looks like." Dismissed. The story moved through the Third Army fast. Some soldiers thought Patton had gone too far, forcing white soldiers to salute a black private in 1945, in an army that was still officially segregated. That was not a small thing. Others thought he hadn't gone far enough. But something shifted. Slowly, unevenly, in the imperfect way that real change actually happens. Black soldiers in the Third Army started getting recognized more. Officers started writing up actions they might previously have left unreported. The bar for who deserved acknowledgement quietly moved. It wasn't a policy change. There was no memo. It was 8 salutes in a tent, and word of mouth, and the fact that everyone who heard the story had to ask themselves the same question. What would I have done? Carter survived the war. He went home to Mississippi in 1946. He kept the soldier's medal in a box in his closet. He didn't talk about the war often. When he did, he always came back to that day in the tent, not the rescue, not the tank, not the explosion. The salutes. In 1985, a local newspaper interviewed him about his wartime experiences. They asked what he remembered most. He said, "The general made them salute me. Not because I was better than them, but because what I did mattered. And they needed to know that." He paused. "That's the day I understood that respect isn't always given. Sometimes it has to be demanded." James Carter died in 1998. He was 75 years old. His family donated the Soldier's Medal to the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It sits in a display case with a small placard that tells the story of the burning tank, the 8 men, the general who made them face what they'd done. The placard includes a quote from Patton, documented in Captain Morris's notes from that day. "You don't salute rank. You salute the man who pulled you out of a burning tank when everyone else was running away." If you visit the museum today, you can see that medal. Simple bronze. A ribbon. Smaller than you'd expect for what it represents. But the story behind it isn't really about the medal. It's about a 22-year-old from Mississippi who ran toward a burning tank for no reason except that 8 men needed help, and a general who understood that acts like that don't become real until someone demands that they be seen. Patton didn't change the army with that meeting in the tent. He didn't end segregation. He didn't fix everything that was broken. But he made 8 men say thank you to the man who saved their lives. Sometimes that's where it starts. Subscribe to WWII Forgotten Frontline. Leave a like, and tell me in the comments, would you have had the courage to run toward that tank? Or the decency to walk back and say thank you?